In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to paint your Ultramarines in 3 alternative colour schemes for your games of Warhammer 40,000. Not only will you learn how to approach painting your Ultramarines in a more simplified way, which is great for someone learning how to paint, but I'm also going to be showing you how to use contrast paints to paint our Ultramarines, as well as painting a cool metallic scheme for their iconic blue armour. And so you can follow along, this is an easy to follow step-by-step guide showing you all the steps and techniques you'll need, so by the end of this tutorial you'll have the confidence and knowledge to paint your Ultramarines however you want. Welcome to TableTopReady, my name's Michael, and I want to show you in this tutorial some different ways that you can paint your Ultramarines that you may find more interesting. All of the paints and brushes I use throughout this tutorial will be shown on the screen as I use them, and they'll also be listed in the description along with any hobby equipment I think you'll find useful, with affiliate links to where you can buy them. And before we get started, I want to say a massive thank you to all the amazing people who've made this tutorial possible with their continued support. It really means a lot. As well, if you enjoy my content here on TableTopReady, then let me know by clicking that like button or leaving me a like. I love reading them and hearing about your own hobby. My goal for this tutorial is to give you guys some ideas and alternatives to get your Space Marines painted, including a more beginner friendly scheme that's going to help you learn the techniques and methods we use to paint our miniatures. When it comes to building your miniatures, we can decide whether we want to fully assemble them or leave parts separate to make painting them a lot easier. When it comes to undercoating your miniatures, I will choose a colour that's going to work best for you, depending on how you decide to paint them. I will show you throughout this tutorial what colours I chose for each scheme and why. Something else we might find useful is having something we can hold on to whilst painting. Here I'm using some plastic shot glasses. This is because having a painting handle or attaching the miniature to something to hold on to makes painting more comfortable and prevents us from touching our miniatures too much. If you need even more help getting your miniatures ready for painting, I do have a dedicated video on the channel showing you how. Also, throughout this tutorial, because I'll be showing you all the techniques and steps that you'll need to get your miniatures painted, I've made it easier to follow along with by splitting the tutorial up into different chapters. And now that we have our Ultramarines built and undercoated, we're now ready to get started. In this first part of the tutorial, I want to show you how we can approach painting our Space Marines and learn some of the techniques that are going to help us create our definition, making some of our details stand out more so we can see them better. For this scheme, I've undercoated our Ultramarine with Macragge Blue, which is going to help when it comes to painting their iconic blue armour. After you've undercoated your Ultramarine, the best place to start is to get all your base colours painted first. This lets us spend time choosing what colours we want to paint everything, and painting becomes less overwhelming as we've created a great starting point to work from. Let's start by painting the power armour using Macragge Blue for the iconic blue armour of the Ultramarines. And I know we already undercoated our miniatures with Macragge Blue undercoat, but the sprays don't always match the colour from the pot with the same name. So this means we get the colour we actually want, we can get to areas we may have missed with the spray, and it won't be so noticeable if we need to neaten up and tidy up any mistakes along the way. And so we achieve best results when painting. We always want to make sure to thin our paints, and I find an equal amount of water does the trick. As well, I like to remove excess paint from the brush on some paper towel first, which helps give us more control over how much paint is deposited. And when we're ready to start painting, we want to keep our brush moving and avoid going over any areas we've already painted to prevent creating any unwanted texture whilst the paint is still drying. Then once you're done, because we thinned our paint, it won't have covered so well, so we will need to paint another layer using the same process. Painting in multiple layers like this means we can get a strong base colour without losing any details. We just need to make sure each layer has fully dried first before applying another one. Honestly, getting all of our base colours painted first is a great place to start, especially for any new painters and beginners. This is going to give us an opportunity to practice those basics, and it also gives us experience with our brush. Let's work on all of those black details next using a Abaddon Black, and this is for any weapon casings and the rib details between the armour. After that, we want to use Mournfang Brown for those belts and pouches. For the purity seals, we can use Spreamer Pink for the wax seal, and for the parchment, let's use some Wraithbone. When you're done painting all of those, we want to get our metallic details painted, starting with our silver details using Iron Hand Steel, Retributor armour for all of our gold details, and then Runelord Brass for the fuel canister. Whilst we're painting our base colours, we do want to do our best to be as neat as possible, but if you're like me, then you will have been a bit messy and made a few mistakes. That's okay though, because we can always go back and neaten up any mistakes and clean up any messy areas as we go along. Doing this really helps make our miniatures look so much better once we're done. With all of our base colours now done, our Ultramarine is looking pretty flat, so it's now time to create some definition, which is going to help to bring out all of those details. The first way we can do this is with a recess shade for our armour, using Night Lord's blue, which we still want to thin down like we normally would. We're doing a recess shade by applying our paint or shade directly into any recesses and details. This is a more controlled way of creating definition than an all over wash, so we don't affect our base colours. If you're a bit messy whilst doing this technique, we just need to neaten up with the McGrag blue base colour. Now we've learnt how to bring out details with a recess shade, we can also do the same using our shades. The shade we're going to start with is Norn Oil, and we can apply this over our belts and pouches, wax seal and silver details. And when using a shade, we want to use enough to cover these details comfortably, so we avoid having the shade pull up too much in details where we don't want it to. If you do see this happening, then we can use our brush to remove any excess shade we don't want. We then need to make sure it fully dries before doing anything else. It's really up to you how you create definition on your miniatures. Just take some time thinking about the different methods that are going to work best, depending on the different details and features that you're working with. Let's continue creating definition for our Ultramarine, using Reikland Flesh Shade for both the Purity Seal parchment and for all the gold details. We can then use some Seraphim Sapphire for our fuel canister. And when all of our shades are fully dried, we can work on getting our Ultramarine highlighted. The idea behind highlighting is to bring out any edges, areas and raised details, to draw our attention to them and to make these features stand out more. The most prominent way of highlighting, and the one we most associate with this, is the line highlight, and it's this highlight that we're going to be focusing on. For this technique, it's a great idea to have a brush you vibe with, that you like to use, and I would keep it separate so it's always up for the task when needed. Again, we want to thin our paint and remove any excess on some paper towel first, which is going to prevent those thick blobby lines. We're going to work on highlighting our blue armour first, and for this we want to use Calgar blue. To do this, just take your time painting thin lines on any edges and around details to bring our attention to them. To make this easier, we can angle our brush against any edge and run it along that edge to create the highlight. For the areas we can't do this, then we just need to take our time painting thin lines where we want our highlights to be. And if you want to know more about highlighting, then I've got a dedicated video on the channel which goes into more detail about what I find helps me and what I did to improve. For me, highlighting has to be one of the most important techniques to really practice and get good at, because not only will it help to improve the look of our miniatures, but it's also going to help us improve our brush control and hand-eye coordination, making us better miniature painters overall. When you're done highlighting the armour, you'll see how it's helped to bring out those edges and details, making more of an impact. Let's continue to highlight everything else now, starting with any black details using Dawnstone. For our belts and pouches, we can highlight them using XV88. For any Purity seals, we can use Emperor's Children for the wax seal, and then Screaming Skull to highlight the parchment. After any Purity seals have been highlighted, we can use Stormhost Silver to highlight our silver details, and then Canoptech Alloy to highlight all of our gold details, as well as the fuel canister. Let's finish our beginner friendly Ultramarine painting the lenses, first using White Scar to paint a line in the centre of each lens. We can then use some Blood Angels contrast in the recess of the lenses, and together they create a glow effect. In this section of the tutorial, I want to show you how we can use contrast paints and what we've already learned as an alternative way to paint your Ultramarine. First of all, we want to work from a lighter undercoat. Here I've used White Scar. This is because contrast paints work best over lighter undercoats to take advantage of how they work, giving us our base colour and at the same time creating our definition. For our Ultramarine armour, we want to start with Celestium Blue, and we want to apply this as evenly as possible. And just like when we're painting our base colours, we want to avoid going over areas we've already applied the contrast, and we want to use enough to cover areas comfortably. We don't need to thin our contrast paints, but I do recommend working from a dry palette, so we can control how much we have on our brush. Take your time making sure we finish each area or detail before moving on to the next for best results, as the contrast dries pretty quickly. I'm a huge fan of using contrast paints. They're very versatile and they can be used alongside the more traditional acrylic paints rather than instead of. This allows us to be more creative in achieving different effects and styles. Once you're done applying the Celestium blue across all of the armour, you'll see it's not really giving us that deep blue we associate with Ultramarines. So let's apply a second coat, this time with Ultramarines blue contrast, to achieve the blue we want for our Ultramarines. This will also help create more definition as well. When that's fully dried, we can continue to get the other areas done. For all the black details, we can use Black Legion. For the other areas, we'll have to neaten things up, so before we continue, let's use some Wraith Bone and tidy up any purity seals, as well as any belts and pouches. Doing this gives us a great starting point for our next contrast paints. For any purity seals, let's use some Skeleton Horde for the parchment, and Lupus Pink for the wax seal. Then for the belts and pouches, let's use Cygor Brown. When you're done, we want to paint the metallic details the same as earlier, with Iron Hand Steel, Retributor Armour, and Runelord Brass. The same shades can then be used to create definition, so Norn Oil, Reikland Flesh Shade, and Seraphim Sapphire. You could stop here and our Ultramarine will be ready for battle, but since we're all now experts, we can go even further using what we've already learnt throughout this tutorial. Let's first work on painting our edge highlights for the armour using Calgar Blue. And to really make an impact, we can do spot highlights painting dots of Fenrisian Grey on all the corners of the armour. Then just like we did earlier, we can highlight the black details with Dawnstone, any belts and pouches using XV88, and for those purity seals we can use Emperor's Children, and this time Wraithbone for the parchment. Again, the metals are highlighted the same as earlier, using Stormhost Silver for all those silver details, and Canoptek Alloy for both the gold details and brass details. The last thing we need to do for our contrasted Ultramarine is to finish the lenses, and this is easily done using White Scar to paint a line in the centre of each lens. We can then apply Blood Angel's Red into the recessed area to create a glow effect for your lenses. In this section of the tutorial, I want to show you another alternative way to paint your Ultramarine, this time in a more metallic style. We first want to start with a lead Boucher undercoat, and I would also paint a base colour over this of the matching colour. This gives us a stronger colour to work from and lets us cover any areas we've missed with the spray. After this we can use our contrast paints again. Here I'm using Azure Blue, and this is applied over the armour to give us a coloured metallic finish. This is because contrast paints are more like inks, so we can take advantage of their transparency and at the same time creating our definition. And I did apply this a second time to give us a richer colour. This is a great way to paint your Ultramarine armour. It's a lot quicker to do and it gives us a different style and feel to your miniatures. When the contrast has dried, let's continue with our metallic style Ultramarine using Iron Hand Steel for the rib details, Iron Warriors for any weapon casings, and again using Retributor Armour for gold details, and Runelord Brass for the fuel canister. For those belts and pouches, we're going to change things up and paint them with a Baden Black. When you're done painting all of your base colours, it's time to create our definition again. For all of our silver details, we can use our Norn Oil, and like before we're using Reikland Flesh Shade for all those gold details, and Seraphim Sapphire for the fuel canister. When it comes to highlighting, rather than doing an edge highlight for the armour, we can use Stormhost Silver to paint chips and scratches along our edges, to add our interest and to bring out the details. Stormhost Silver is again used to highlight our silver details, and again Canoptek Alloy is used to highlight our gold and brass details. Then our belts and pouches are highlighted using Dawnstone. The lenses are done in exactly the same way as our other two schemes, using White Scar and then Blood Angel's Red so we can get a cool glow effect for our lenses. I've really enjoyed making this tutorial and getting the chance to show you some alternative ways to paint an Ultramarines. And I also wanted to show you some different ways that we can paint our miniatures and some different styles that we can use. So let's see how they turned out. But before we see the reveal, I do want to take a moment to thank Phil, Leonardo Ferrer, Marrowind ES19, Vasily Zverev, Z1 Ewan, Thanawin Kumtad, and Ryan's Way, who have all recently become supporters for the channel. Thank you so much. And if you enjoy the content here on TableTopReady and want to help support the channel as well, you can become a channel member or join my Patreon, which not only helps me create this content, it also gives you access to our Discord, along with access to lots of other perks for as little as £2 a month. And for every tier you'll also get tutorials early and be kept up to date with what I'm up to behind the scenes. Our Ultramarines are now finished, and I hope I've been able to give you the confidence and knowledge to get your own painted. I've got plenty of other tutorials on the channel, including a more in-depth tutorial on how to paint Ultramarines more like you would see on the box. And there are a lot of other tutorials showing how to paint some of the other Space Marine units, so make sure to go and check those out as well. I really do enjoy making these tutorials, and I hope you find them useful. If you do, then please leave a like and let me know in the comments below. As well, make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on future content, and I'll see you in the next video.